With the United States' victory in the Second World War, it has positioned itself as a champion of Western democracy, strongly upholding its capitalist values and vehemently opposes the communist East led by the Soviet Union. The nation's military continues to grow to face the Red Menace, but now that nukes are on the table for both sides, could the United States and the West truly survive against such a formidable foe? So hey guys, and welcome back to another episode of HOI4, the Cold War Iron Curtain mod. Last time I played this mod, I played as the Soviet Union, and that got quite a lot of views. So why not do the same thing with the other superpower in 1949, the United States of America. Our goal in this playthrough is to look at some of the domestic policies of different US presidents, but more importantly to win as many proxy wars as possible, and to also start a war against the Soviet Union at the earliest possible opportunity. I know the US technically has content until the 1980s, but frankly I don't think I can get myself to play through 21 years in any HOI4 game. So let's sit back, relax, and get started with this playthrough, shall we? Now, one of the first regions where we can intervene as the United States of America in the late 1940s to early 1950s is of course Asia. More specifically, in the Chinese Civil War. The Chinese Civil War is raging, the ROC is struggling to stop the communist PRC. We must consider our options to approaching this situation. One option is to let things play out. The other option is to approach the United Nations to rally international cooperation in resolving the conflict in favor of the Republic of China. Finally, we can simply intervene directly to save the Chinese people from communist tyranny. Regarding with how we deal with the Chinese Civil War, yeah, we'll have to directly intervene. There's just literally no other way if we actually want to win this war. You know, in number, the PRC heavily outnumbers the ROC. The ROC has this ridiculous national spirit that ensures that they'll never win, and I don't think my volunteers will be able to reach Shanghai quick enough. So yeah, I know the Cold War is all about that proxy wars, sending equipment, sending volunteers, but in this case, we just have to join the fray. The American intervention in the Chinese Civil War. Well, this won't end well. And there we go, shortly after our landing in Tianjin, we have taken the PRC capital of Beijing, and our boys are coming to reinforce the naval invasion force. And hey, after even more pushing, we have now split the People's Liberation Army in half, and it doesn't seem like they have the strength to stop us. And there we go. After our intervention in the Chinese Civil War, the People's Liberation Army has capitulated. The Soviets intervened in the Chinese Civil War as well to recover what is left of China, and we have won the Chinese Civil War on behalf of the Republic of China. Immediately after our victory, we can of course move to reaffirm US-Chinese relations, and we can start working on some of our internal affairs, like passing acts related to the Truman administration, and also approaching potential political enemies through the White Terror and MacArthurism. Very epic. But unfortunately, this peace cannot last long. The Democratic People's Republic of Korea has launched an invasion on the Republic of Korea, and the Korean War begins. Now, of course, as a close ally to the Republic of Korea, we must do all we can to help them. And we can achieve that by getting the UN to help with the war, and also sending volunteers to Korea. Let the US intervention in the Korean War begin.
일본
Alright, and now, after some pushing from our coalition of the United Nations, the UN coalition forces have successfully invaded and occupied Pyongyang, the capital of North Korea. At the same time, as our coalition forces approaches the Yalu River, the remnants of the PLA is starting to feel a little bit threatened by the situation. And that results in, you guessed it, PLA entering Korea and the resummation of the Chinese Civil War. So, after those developments, most of Asia is now split between two factions. The anti-communist bloc, consisting of the Republic of China, the Republic of the Philippines, the State of Vietnam, as well as the ROK, and the People's Liberation Front, consisting of the East Turkestan Republic, Mongolian People's Republic, PLA, DPRK, and the Democratic Republic of Vietnam. Our intervention in this grand Asian conflict will be divided into 3 stages. In the first stage, we will attempt to take all remaining North Korean cities to ensure the capitulation of North Korea. Then in our second stage, we will send troops over to the ROC, attempt to defeat the remnants of the PLA in Manchuria. Then finally, in our third and last stage, we will head down to Vietnam, because American interventions in Vietnam has always historically been successful, and there's no way this could go wrong. There we go. South Korean forces today defeated the communist rebels of the DPRK, calling for its immediate annexation. Let's move on to the second stage of our plan, shall we? Then hey, that's the second time Beijing has fallen to the Republic of China in like 2 years.
Korea, far across the sea. It's the same old story, and it's up to Old Glory to win another fight for liberty. So keep the home fires burning, and it won't be long until I'll be returning. Goodbye, Maria, though I'm off to Korea in my...
Hey, and there we go. The PLA has capitulated. And for some strange reason, by association, the Mongolian People's Republic and the East Turkestan Republic has also disappeared. Don't ask me why, I don't know, but hey, I'm not complaining. Apparently now Thailand, Laos and Cambodia has also joined the pact, and we can now focus on our last stage of the operation, taking Vietnam. Oh great, apparently MacArthur is unhappy about something. Boy, I sure do love pre-coded events. You know, in case you haven't noticed, we're not fighting in Korea anymore.
I was a G.I. Joe and you were Bella Marie. Soon we were married, then we sailed away across the ocean blue to my home in Iowa. There we've been living happy as can be, raising fields of corn and a small family. But now, Maria, you must be brave and smile. We're in another fight, so I must leave you for a while. So now it's goodbye, Maria. I'm off to Korea, far across the sea. It's the same old story, and it's up to Old Glory.
And finally, there we have it. The Democratic Republic of Vietnam has capitulated. The People's Liberation Front is completely annihilated. And now we have a beefy Seoul Treaty Organization, an anti-communist alliance across most of Asia. Trust me, that will come useful later down the line. Remember about that whole MacArthur event chain thing? Well yeah, we still have to deal with it. So apparently from that whole debacle, Truman has grown concerned that MacArthur continuously operates independently from the White House, and at times he has interfered in foreign policy. We're presented with 2 choices here, and we can either relieve MacArthur, which according to event chain leads to us a tax-losing scheme, or we can relieve MacArthur for insubordination. And I assume if you want MacArthur for president is the way to go. Both choices are quite compelling actually, so let's put it on the randomizer, spin the wheel and see what we get. Relieve MacArthur. Well, you heard the wheel, let's do it then. The White House messaged the Army Secretary to inform General MacArthur that he would be relieved. And upon returning to San Francisco from Korea, General MacArthur was met by senior military officers in the region and given a parade attended by 500,000 people. After a speech, many representatives and senators expressed their dismay that Truman would remove MacArthur. After addressing Congress, General MacArthur flew to New York City, where he received the largest ticker tape parade in history of the city. And Senate Republicans also start investigating Truman over MacArthur. Don't worry though, as after investigation, Senate inquiry absolves Truman, and finally that leads to MacArthur attacks losing steam and MacArthur declining to campaign. Alright, and now with the MacArthur Debacle done and dealt with, we can start our second round of expansion. Basically, our big strategy here is to surround the Soviet Union with a series of anti-communist nations to help our situation if and when World War III breaks out. Obviously, our first round of expansion in Asia yielded huge results, but our second round of expansion would not be so simple as the first, as there wouldn't be any big outright proxy wars. With that being said, our main expansion now is confined into two main categories: expanding NATO and using the CIA to stage coups and overthrow other countries' governments. I'll elaborate on that a little later, but one of them is clearly simpler than the other. So let's start by expanding NATO, shall we? In a recent conference of NATO leaders, discussion was held on expanding the organization to include more frontline states to the organization. West Germany, Greece, and Turkey all facing communist forces on its borders and the risk of subversion. These states can be strengthened and protected from overt and covert Soviet threats. So, one by one, we can start inviting Turkey, West Germany, and Greece to NATO. And there we go, Turkey accepts and joins NATO, West Germany accepts and joins NATO, and finally, Greece, which is apparently in a civil war, also joins NATO. Interesting. So, with that done, we can now move on to our epic CIA missions. Among all of these countries, the most strategically important countries to overthrow would be Albania, Iran, and Syria. However, there is a significant limit when it comes to CIA missions, and it's that most of the time, they don't do anything. To show you what I'm talking about, let's first start with the CIA mission of Albania. The British SIS approached us about a plan. British believed the agents could organize a mass revolt. With supply jobs, they can eventually overthrow Hoxha and end the communist threat. To reinforce our operation here, we'll do a few things, including contacting British and the exiled royalists, and establishing the Free Albanian National Committee. And finally, between the choice of listening to SOG and following British intelligence, we are going to listen to SOG, and there's that. After completing these focuses, the game will now run a dice of probability, and at a certain date we'll know whether our operations in Albania succeed or not. The problem is, since we're on historical mode, the chances of Hoxha actually being overthrown is very, very low. And that's what I meant when I said that most of these CIA operations doesn't even do anything. Further reinforce my point, I'm going to use Iran as another example. You know, here we have the choice between working with the MI6 or ignoring the MI6. And when we actually work with the MI6, that's that. The actual outcome of Operation IX depends not on us, but on the Iranian AI and which path they choose in the focus tree. In other words, it doesn't matter what we do. Unfortunately, our overtures in the CIA has been very rudely interrupted by the 1952 presidential elections. It's July, so we'll deal with the primary elections first. For the Republican Party nomination, there's only one choice, and it's Dwight Eisenhower. But for the Democratic Party nominations, things are a little bit more complicated, as there are up to 5 potential nominees. So, like the MacArthur thing, let's just put these options on a wheel and see what we get. Afro Harriman. And finally, for the actual elections of 1952 in November, we have the choice between Harriman and Eisenhower. So let's put it on the wheel one last time to decide who our president will be. And it seems like it will be Dwight Eisenhower. Under the clouds of war, it is humanity hanging on a cross of iron. Well, looks like after all, we are going for the historical option. Remember the whole CIA Albania mission? Remember how I said there's a very, very low chance of it succeeding? Well, yeah, it didn't succeed. It really should have been expected. Anyway, now that Eisenhower has been elected, it means that we can start doing focuses related to the Eisenhower administration, and we can start focusing on our expansion goals again, which in the short term is finishing our CIA overtures in Syria and going to space. Yes, space. As even though it's only 1953, apparently we have researched everything needed to launch an unmanned array into orbit. So, time to go to space. Following extensive investment in the nationalized space program, Dwight Eisenhower announced the successful launch of an unmanned array into Earth's orbit. This is amazing. Alright, space down, Syria left to go. Recently, the CIA held talks with former Syrian minister over the prospect of an anti-communist coup in the country by the military. So, regarding Syria, we are faced with two choices, either to abandon the coup and bribe generals instead, or do the coup anyway. Since I'm confident that both of these coups will fail, might as well go with Operation Strago. And let's see how this goes. Failed coup in Syria. Again, really should have expected this. Luckily, unlike Albania, we can actually do something about Syria once the coup fails, which is invading Syria. America is starting a war in the Middle East. Name a more iconic duo. And there we go, that's Syria gone. And as 1956, which should come the first chance in which we can start World War III, comes ever closer, it is time for us to make our military preparations to defend ourselves from the Soviets. Now, by all means, the Soviets will outnumber us when the war starts, so our plans will be focused on bleeding them dry before they can advance. Firstly, when faced with the decision of Austrian reunification, we will say yes to a neutral, demilitarized Austrian state, since it can reduce the amount of provinces we have to defend. Secondly, our defenses against the Soviet Union will be divided into 4 parts: the German front, the Greek front, the Turkish front, and last but not least, the Norwegian front. When we have caused enough casualties, we will of course go on the defensive, and that will be aided by our fast collaborative network that we have set up in most Eastern Bloc countries, which will undoubtedly help us in putting an end to the Warsaw Pact once and for all. But for now, we wait. On a side note, if you are wondering what focus I've been doing all this time, trust me, it's nothing interesting. Most of them is about passing these bills or slightly tweaking other countries' politics. Some of them might be a little bit interesting, but trust me, you're not missing out on much. And there we go. It's happening. With the situation in Budapest quickly spiraling out of control, the Hungarian Communist Secretary called on the Soviet forces in the country to intervene. The Soviet forces moved in early this morning and are expected to set up positions at the parliament and key junctions by the early afternoon. And there we go, the Hungarian Revolution. Regarding the Hungarian Revolution, we get the big decision here. The revolution in Hungary could be the beginning of the end of the Iron Curtain. However, the Soviets will likely try to stomp out the revolution. What should we do? And you know what we're going to do? We're going to issue an ultimatum. And our ultimatum has not been heeded as Soviet forces invaded Hungary, and the curtain holds. With the Soviets invading Hungary despite our ultimatum, we are now faced with 2 final choices: either to back down or to stand by our word. Except for the fact that we can't actually do any of these focuses because the defense have not been developed yet. But an ultimatum is an ultimatum, and I will not let any unfinished game mechanics hinder the fact that we're going to stand by our word and start World War III. Alright, so now 2 months after the beginning of the war, and I must say, we're doing much better than expected. You know, in the north here, we actually pushed and took the entire Soviet province of Murmansk, and in the south we took large parts of Georgia, as well as the whole of Armenia and Azerbaijan. And we have even managed to push a little bit into the DDR by taking the province of Schwerin. official report, by the dawn of the 10th of December 1956, American 4th Infantry units has taken the entirety of the German capital of Berlin, and now let's continue our advances and bring about the defeat of the DDR. Alright, 1 month after the capture of Berlin, our forces has managed to make a major breakthrough in Poland. You can see here our infantry units have reached the port of Gdansk, the road to Kaliningrad is wide open, and the withdrawal of Soviet troops to reinforce this front could mean the capitulation of the GDR soon. And there we go. 4 months after the beginning of the war, the first country of the Iron Curtain has capitulated, and for the first time since 1945, Germany is united. A look, an encirclement. After about 4 months from consolidating the front in Poland, we have successfully entered Lithuania, and to the south we have also reached the important city of Astrakhan, seizing the majority of the Caucasus while doing so. Ooh, the Soviets seems to have left the entire frontier empty. Is that an opportunity to encircle the entire Czech Republic? And there we go, that's the whole of Czechia, mostly encircled. The Soviet army is crippling, and it's only a matter of time before the inevitable happens. There we go, shortly after the encirclement of Czechia, the Polish People's Republic has officially capitulated before we have even taken Warsaw. And would you look at that, we have 4 divisions heading to Leningrad with very little resistance in sight. The Soviets has about, in total, 10 divisions across the entire Baltic front. I think it's undeniable at this point that the Soviet army is lapsing. So, as we approach the final stage of World War III, here's what we're going to do. In the north, our divisions will attempt to take Leningrad, then our forces in the south will sweep the remaining Soviet satellite states, then finally we will march towards the Soviet capital of Moscow, and do what a certain man with a mustache never could. And here we have it, the Czechoslovak Republic has capitulated, and we're also moving towards Leningrad. Next up, Hungary has capitulated. Bulgaria has capitulated. And finally, the Social Republic of Romania has capitulated, and our infantry units are an inch away from Moscow and Volgograd. This is truly the endgame.
Это оно. Американцы приближаются к нашей столице, вот-вот падет Москва, вот-вот падет Волгоград. Скоро в нашей столице водрузят американские флаги, и наш лидер будет вынужден сниматься в рекламе Pizza Hut. Нет. Мы не можем этого допустить, мы не можем допустить, чтобы нашу страну постигла такая ужасная судьба. Так что, думаю, у нас остается только один выбор.
The first atomic bombing of the Cold War. For the first time since the end of World War II, a nuclear bomb has been detonated as part of international warfare. The destruction stands as a testament to the devastating power of this weapon, which is feared not only for what it can do to its target, but what implications it has for one who deploys it, and for humanity itself. The atomic era has truly begun. And here we go, it's all going off. Atomic bombing of London. Early reports suggest Buckingham Palace has been completely leveled and the whereabouts of the royal family are currently unknown. The atomic bombing of Paris. The Parisians had perhaps expected conquest, but not utter brutal desolation. The atomic bombing of Copenhagen. The capital has never experienced attack close to as devastating since the Napoleonic Wars. An atomic bombing of Rome. With the Vatican City also partially destroyed and the whereabouts of the Pope unknown, the event has horrified not only Italians, but Catholics around the world. It's all going on. No place in Europe is spared from this nuclear onslaught. And with this nuclear attack, there's only one thing we can do in return. Hey look, the world ends. Again. Hundreds of millions of people vaporized from this nuclear warfare, and the world is now thrown into utter disarray under the leadership of the Karen National Liberation Army. I know, very cool. And that's the video. I know I haven't uploaded in a very long time, apologies for that, but trust me, I really plan on doing so more. Possibly by creating shorter, more lightweight videos. So, if you haven't already done so, hit that subscribe button, notification bell so that you can be notified when I upload a new video. Of course, like this video if you enjoyed it, and well, hopefully I'll see you relatively soon. Alright, goodbye.